When my dad passed, the will was simple. My sister got everything. The house, the savings, even the old truck he loved more than most people. She called it what he wanted. I didn't argue. I just took the small wooden box he left with my name on it, and walked away. Everyone said I should fight it, that I deserved half. But I didn't care about half. I cared about why. Why she got it all. Why he looked at me the way he did in that hospital room. Like there was something he couldn't say out loud. It took months before I opened that box, and when I did, I realized my father hadn't left me nothing. He'd left me everything that actually mattered. Stay with me, because what was hidden inside didn't just change how I saw him. It changed how I saw her. Let's start from the beginning. He was the kind of father who believed in quiet lessons, not the kind you find in books or in long talks that try to explain the world, but in the things he did every day. Marcus, his name, worked as a mechanic for 30 years, and every night he came home smelling like oil and metal. He wasn't the type to hug much, but when he looked at you, really looked, it felt like he already knew what you were trying to say. His 2 kids, Lena and Jordan, grew up in that small town rhythm school: chores, dinner, repeat. Lena was the older one, always in control, sharp in her words, confident in a way that made people listen. Jordan, the younger, was quieter. The kind of kid who stayed up late fixing radios or sketching blueprints of things he'd never build. Their father never favored one over the other. Or at least that's what Jordan thought for most of his life. But when their mother died early, something in the house changed. Lena took charge. She made the phone calls, arranged the funeral, handled the insurance papers. Jordan just drifted through the motions, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to handle grief that large. Their father didn't talk much during that time either. He just kept working, and sometimes Jordan would find him in the garage at midnight, staring at a photograph on the workbench. There were moments when Jordan wanted to ask what he was thinking, but he never did. As years passed, they all settled into quiet routines. Lena got married, moved to towns over, and started her own real estate business. She called home less. Jordan stayed close, helping their dad on weekends, keeping the old garage running. They didn't talk about money or inheritance or what would happen someday. That topic always felt wrong, too cold, too far away from what really mattered. Then, the sickness came. It was sudden and unfair. The kind that gives you time to say goodbye but not enough to prepare. Jordan visited every day after work, bringing soup and fixing things around the house. Lena came on weekends, sometimes staying just long enough to post a photo and say she was helping Dad. Their father didn't complain. He never did. But the last week before he passed, something shifted. One evening, Jordan sat by his bed. The air smelled of disinfectant and wilted flowers. His father turned his head slowly, eyes steady, and said, "You always knew how to listen, son." It was such a simple thing, but it stuck with Jordan like a knot in his chest. He didn't know what it meant until much later. The funeral was small neighbors, old co-workers, a few cousins. Afterward, they gathered in the lawyer's office. The air was thick with the kind of tension people pretend isn't there. The lawyer opened a brown envelope, cleared his throat, and began to read. Lena got the house, the truck, the savings account, the life insurance, everything of visible worth. When Jordan's name came up, the lawyer paused and handed him a small, worn wooden box. No explanation, just that Lena gave a polite, almost pitying smile. "I guess Dad trusted me to handle things," she said lightly. Jordan nodded, trying not to let his face show what he felt. He didn't argue, didn't ask why. He just left. That night, he placed the box on his kitchen table. It was small enough to fit in both hands. Its corners softened from years of handling. The lock was simple, a brass latch that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. He didn't open it right away. Something about it made him feel like he shouldn't. It wasn't fear, it was something closer to respect. Like opening it too soon would break whatever message his father had meant to leave behind. Weeks turned into months. Jordan kept working, fixing cars, minding his own business. People stopped talking about the inheritance. Lena posted photos of her new house, the one that used to be their father's, freshly painted with modern furniture. Jordan avoided driving past it. Then one night, while cleaning his kitchen, he accidentally knocked the box off the table. It hit the floor with a soft thud, the latch snapping open. For a long moment, he just stared at it. Then he knelt down, opened the lid, and found what his father had really left behind. Inside was a folded letter, a small notebook, and a single old key tied to a faded blue string. The letter was written in his father's uneven handwriting, the kind that always slanted down at the edges. Jordan unfolded it slowly, his hands trembling without reason. The first line stopped him cold. If you're reading this, then you already understand that what's worth keeping doesn't always look valuable. The words were simple, but heavy. The rest of the letter talked about lessons about patience, integrity, and quiet pride. And then it mentioned something else. A locker, downtown, under his father's name. The key in the box fit that locker. Jordan sat there in silence for a long time. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light flickering above him. Somewhere between grief and curiosity, he felt something stir, a need to know what his father had hidden. By the time he stood up, it was past midnight, but he didn't care. He grabbed his jacket, pocketed the key, and stepped out into the cold night. The streets were empty, the kind of silence that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. He didn't know what he'd find, but for the first time since the funeral, he felt like he was moving toward something real. He didn't know it yet, but that small key was about to open more than a locker. It was going to open a truth his sister never expected him to find. The locker was tucked away in the corner of an old bus station storage area. The kind of place most people forgot existed. The walls were stained with years of dust and rust, and the overhead light buzzed with a faint hum. Jordan's breath fogged in the cold air as he slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click to easily, like it had been waiting all this time. Inside, there wasn't gold or money or anything that screamed inheritance. Just an old photo album, a rolled-up document, and a small metal tin. For a few seconds, Jordan just stared at them, confused. He took everything home and spread it across his kitchen table under the same flickering light that had seen the box fall open weeks earlier. The photo album was the first thing he opened. Most of the pictures were black and white, some faded to sepia. His father in his 20s, standing beside a car with a wide smile. His mother in a sundress, holding baby Jordan on her hip while Lena clung to her leg. The pages smelled like dust and oil and time. But what caught his eye wasn't the pictures, it was the notes scribbled under them. His father had written small messages beside each one. First job, don't forget where you start. Your mother laughed here. Everything we built was for later. The words felt like whispers from another life. Then, he unrolled the document. It was an ownership deed, his father's name listed alongside an unfamiliar one, tied to a piece of land just outside town. Not the house Lena had claimed, but a small patch of unused property near the old workshop. Jordan's mind started racing. That land had been abandoned for years. No one cared about it, yet his father had written his name on it. Long before the will was drawn, he felt a mix of disbelief and quiet understanding forming in his chest. His father hadn't forgotten him. The gift wasn't loud or grand. It was something hidden, something that needed patience to find, something that reflected the way the old man lived his whole life. But there was more. Inside the tin were receipts, notes, and a small envelope with a single line written on it. When the time is right, make it work again. Inside the envelope, Jordan found $5,000 in cash neatly folded. No explanation. It was enough to start something small, something new. His heart tightened. He thought about the old workshop, the smell of grease and sawdust, and how his father used to say, everything worth doing takes time. That night, Jordan didn't sleep. He sat with the album, the deed, and the money, piecing together what it all meant. His father had seen something in him all along: patience, resilience, the quiet kind of loyalty that doesn't demand attention. And maybe, just maybe, this was his way of passing that torch. A few days later, Jordan drove out to the property. It was just as he remembered: a small stretch of land, overgrown with weeds, the remains of an old workshop leaning against itself. But standing there, he felt a kind of peace he hadn't felt in months. It wasn't about ownership. It was about legacy. He could almost hear his father's voice saying, "You don't need the biggest piece to build something that lasts." Still, Lena didn't see it that way. When she found out, because of course she did, her reaction was immediate and sharp. She called him, her voice clipped with disbelief. "You're telling me he left you the land? That's ridiculous. It's worthless, Jordan. You should have told me first." Jordan kept his tone calm. "It's what he left. That's all I know." She laughed, a short, cold sound. He must have been confused near the end. Dad wouldn't split things like that. But deep down, Jordan knew she wasn't angry about the land. She was angry that there was something she hadn't known about. Their father had left her everything visible, the assets, the property, the money. But he'd left Jordan something deeper, something only time could reveal. That Lena didn't drop it though. Weeks later, she showed up at the property, heels sinking into the dirt, her car idling nearby. "You really think you can make something of this?" she asked, scanning the lot with disdain. Jordan shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe I'll just fix it up and see what happens." She shook her head. "You always were the dreamer." "Yeah," he said quietly. "Guess one of us had to be." After she left, he started cleaning the place. One day turned into a week, then into a month. He repaired the roof, cleared the vines, repainted the door. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. The sound of tools, the scent of oilet, brought his father's presence back in small, invisible ways. He found himself smiling without realizing it. As word spread that Jordan was restoring the old workshop, people from town began stopping by. Some offered help, others just wanted to talk about his father. They told stories. Jordan had never heard how his dad used to fix people's cars for free if they couldn't afford it. How he once built a playground swing for a neighbor's kid without being asked. Those stories filled in the gaps of everything Jordan had been too young to see. Meanwhile, Lena's life looked perfect on the surface. Her business grew, her house was beautiful, her posts polished. But when she came by months later and saw the workshop almost finished, its old sign cleaned, the new one hanging beside it with her father's name still carved into the wood, something in her expression shifted. She stood there for a long time before finally saying, "He really left this to you, huh?" Jordan nodded. "Yeah, guess he thought I'd know what to do with it." She didn't answer right away. Then she sighed, almost to herself. "He always said you had his patience. I didn't get that part." For the first time in a long while, there wasn't bitterness in her voice, just a trace of something else, maybe understanding, maybe regret. By the end of that year, the workshop reopened as a small repair and restoration shop. People came not just for the service, but because it reminded them of his father. Jordan named it Marcus and Son Repair, keeping his father's legacy alive in the most ordinary, honest way. He never told Lena about the cash in the tin. He never needed to. The real inheritance wasn't the money, or even the land. It was the quiet lesson hidden between old tools and tired hands that what lasts the longest isn't what you're given, but what you build when no one's watching. Months passed, and the workshop began to hum with life again. Jordan spent most days covered in grease, working long hours that left his hands raw but his heart oddly full. There was something sacred about rebuilding a space that had once held his father's laughter and quiet strength. Customers came and went, leaving stories in exchange for repairs. Each one seemed to carry a thread that connected back to his father somehow, as if the man's presence still lingered between the walls and in the smell of sawdust and oil. The more Jordan worked, the more he understood that his father's real gift wasn't land or money. It was the faith that something honest, built with your own hands, could outlast resentment. But the peace didn't last forever. One afternoon, a notice arrived, an official envelope bearing Lena's name. Inside was a formal request to buy the property from him, to resolve family matters amicably. She offered double its value, her words perfectly polite, her tone unmistakably transactional. Jordan sat with it for a long time. On paper, it was a good deal. Selling would mean a clean break. No more arguments, no more tension. Yet he couldn't bring himself to sign. This wasn't just property anymore. It was a conversation he was still having with his father, one nail and brush stroke at a time. Instead of replying, he invited her to visit. She came, dressed neatly as always, her perfume cutting through the scent of old wood. When she walked through the restored doorway, her eyes softened despite herself. The sunlight filtered through the window, catching dust in the air. And for a moment she looked younger, like the sister who used to race him through their yard barefoot. Jordan handed her a mug of coffee, still steaming, and said quietly, "This was Dad's favorite spot." She nodded, looking around. "You did all this yourself?" "Mostly. Some neighbors helped. Dad taught me enough to figure out the rest." Her lips pressed together in thought. "You could have sold it, you know. No one would have blamed you." He smiled faintly, and missed the fun of scraping off 10 years of rust. "Not a chance." Lena laughed, a real one, small but genuine. For the first time since the inheritance, they weren't opponents. They were just two people standing in the same memory. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "You always understood him better than I did." Jordan didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, after she left, he sat on the front steps of the workshop and looked out at the quiet road. The sky was bruised with fading light. and he felt that same pull in his chest, the sense that something had ended and begun at the same time. His father had known what he was doing. The money Lena fought over would fade, get spent, maybe even forgotten, but the workshop would stay. It was proof that something good could be rebuilt from what was broken. Still, the story didn't quite end there. Months later, Jordan received a letter in the mail, handwritten, with his sister's looping script. She wrote that she had visited their father's lawyer again, out of curiosity. The lawyer had shown her a note their father had left, sealed but undelivered. It read, "Tell Jordan that patience grows where pride dies, and tell Lena if she ever finds her peace, it's already hers." Jordan read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it inside the album where it belonged. It was such a simple message, yet it unraveled everything, every argument, every grudge, every silence that had stretched between them. His father hadn't meant to divide them, he had meant to teach them. The lesson wasn't about fairness, it was about faith that each of them would find what they truly valued, even if it took loss to see it. Over time, Lena began stopping by more often. Sometimes she brought coffee, sometimes she just stood in the doorway watching him work. She never asked about money again. Instead, she asked questions about their father, about how certain tools worked, about the small things she'd never noticed as a child. Slowly, the tension between them began to dissolve, replaced by something quieter: mutual understanding, maybe even affection. One evening, Jordan was finishing up a job when she appeared with a box of old family photos she'd found in her attic. They sat on the floor, sorting through them, laughing at their younger selves, and talking about their parents like they were both still around. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was real. When Lena got up to leave, she paused by the doorway and said, "You know, Dad would have liked what you did here." Jordan smiled. "He already does." After she drove away, he stayed outside a while longer. Listening to the hum of cicadas and the faint sound of cars on the distant road, he looked at the glowing sign above the door: Marcus and Son Repair, and felt that same quiet pride his father used to carry. The revenge, if it could even be called that, had never been about payback. It was about proving that what truly matters can't be stolen or claimed with a signature. It's something you earn every day, by doing right by the people who came before you and by the life you're trying to build. He had no need to tell anyone what was hidden in that tin or what the money had done. The workshop spoke for itself. Every nail, every sound of the drill, every smile from a returning customer, it was all part of his father's invisible gift, a kind of inheritance that didn't need to be written in any will. In time, Jordan expanded the place, hiring a few apprentices and adding a small cafe corner for customers who wanted to wait. He hung some of his father's old tools on the wall, not as decoration but as reminders. The town grew to love the place again, and people began to say the workshop felt like a heartbeat: steady, familiar, comforting. Lena eventually became part of it too. She handled the paperwork, sometimes even served coffee to customers when Jordan was too busy fixing something. And though they rarely talked about the past, there was an ease between them that hadn't existed in years. On the first anniversary of reopening the shop, Jordan placed a small framed photo of their father on the counter. In it, Marcus was smiling, one hand resting on a young Jordan's shoulder. Underneath it, he wrote one sentence on a card: "Built once, rebuilt again." That night, as he locked up and turned off the lights, Jordan looked back at the quiet workshop and realized the inheritance had done exactly what his father intended, had rebuilt not just a building, but a family. And in that simple, silent realization, everything made sense.